See, that's one of the great things about Jesus and the good news of the Holy Spirit is that we don't need to just reflect backwards on the disciples 2,000 years ago. We only have to reflect upon our own lives to see that Jesus is still here, to see that the power of God is still alive. And I don't know about you, but I think we get to see the power of the Holy Spirit here in this church week in and week out, over and over again, as we see not only our lives being transformed, but we see the lives of all those who come to this place to find transformation, to seek out healing, and to know that God is with us. That is the glory of the Holy Spirit. I want to tell you, I am so proud of spiritual communities in these last few months. Spiritual communities who have stepped out in faith to speak up for LGBT people of all and no faith. I've been so encouraged. Yesterday, many of us traveled to Fresno. I didn't know where Fresno was. Thank God for GPS. You punch in the address and the car tells you which way to go. But yesterday, many of us traveled up to Fresno to the Meet in the Middle rally that happened yesterday. About 4,000, 5,000 people gathered from the Northern California and from Southern California, and we met in the middle. And I want to tell you, there was a march yesterday of about 100 people who marched from Selma, I want to get this right, to Fresno. I'm told it's about 14 or 15 miles. They started off at about 6 o'clock in the morning, and it was a bit like a relay race. You all start off together, and then a truck comes and picks you up, and when you can't walk anymore. But I want to tell you, there were two folks who marched the entire route, and they were two people of faith. Reverend Eric Lees, who's the president of the Southern Christian Coalition, the organization that was founded by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and Reverend Lindy Ramsden from the Unitarian Universalist Legislative Ministries. And I want to tell you, they are not spring chickens. Eric Lees was actually around and marched with Dr. Martin Luther King. I don't want to be rude because my mother always told me you never tell a woman's age. But Reverend Lindy Ramsden is a little older than me. And they marched the entire route and brought in the final crowd that came in to meet us in the middle. It was wonderful to see in our community people of faith leading us to the place where we met in the middle. And it was just amazing yesterday, as it was in West Hollywood on Tuesday night, to see the array of clergy folks from so many different denominations who were standing alongside for the cause of justice, for the cause of transformation. And yesterday, each and every one who was able to spoke about the need to change our hearts, and to change our hearts by the power and the love of God that we know in our own understanding. And to the crowds on Tuesday and to the crowds yesterday, we finally heard the good news that our hearts and our minds will be changed, not by politicians, but will be changed by people of faith who are out there in the world speaking in tongues, speaking our story, speaking it in such a way that people will get to understand who we are and who God intends for us to be. That's speaking in tongues, sisters and brothers. I'm going to tell you the only thing that disappointed me yesterday, and I spoke to Winter about it this morning as Winter and I were up there yesterday and several others of you. But what disappointed me yesterday was that we didn't take the opportunity to get out into the community of Fresno and to actually speak to our friends and neighbors and to put a face to this issue. We were certainly engaged with the rally and certainly engaged in listening to speaker after speaker after speaker after speaker for nearly 5 hours, speaker after speaker. But sometimes I think we only talk to our own. Sometimes I think we preach to the choir. And sometimes I think that we need to, just as those disciples heard the good news of Jesus being spoke in different tongues in the community beyond the walls of their own safety net. And they had to reconcile and get themselves out there so that they were part of the us. sometimes I think that we too need to get ourselves out into the community. And instead of just preaching to the choir, preach to those who perhaps are a little antagonistic towards us. And to love our enemies. And to speak our truth. You know, I said once that to know us is to love us. And I think that is true. I think when you start to dialogue with one another, you break down the barriers that have so often separated us. And we get to love one another. We get to see one another for the realities, because people get to see the inside and not just the outside shell, or just the perceived outside shell. You know, for those disciples who gathered in that upper room, when they started hearing the words of Jesus and on all that was being spoken by Gentiles and non-Jews, they had to reconcile that they were people who were outside of their box, outside of their framework, outside of their own understanding, who were suddenly getting the good news of Jesus. They could no longer be in the safety net of their own little cocoon, their own little upper room that they would retreat to. But they had to get out into the world and hear the story afresh through the eyes of different peoples. Sisters and brothers, I truly believe in this, our day of Pentecost, it is for us to tell our story into the world, to tell our story as people of faith, and to tell our story as those who have had our eyes wide open. And not in a way that judges or a way that makes fun of other people. I don't think calling someone a bigot actually makes them friendly towards us. But actually getting out into our community and saying, you know, friends, I know that you don't understand me. And at some level, I don't understand you. But I want to speak in tongues this morning. And I want to wait upon the Holy Spirit to give interpretation to the stories of our lives. Holy Spirit, the interpretation of our lives, so that folks get to know that the good news that has been so often restricted to this group of people is now being broadened to this group of people.